A chill. It was the first thing. A deep, permeating cold that seeped into something. Something new. Something fragile. There was no memory of before. No warmth. Only the relentless press of stone. Rough. Unforgiving. The texture gnawed at what he would later understand was skin. A coarse rasp against an unfamiliar surface. It was a primal sensation, a language spoken in the absence of words. Then, scent. Faint, a whisper of damp earth. A green, earthy musk of moss clinging to the cold stone. It filled the narrow space, a silent offering in a kingdom of silence. Silence. It was absolute, oppressive, a tangible weight pressing down. No wind, no rustling leaves, no bird song, just nothing. A vast, echoing void within a larger void. Movement, a clumsy twitch, a tremor that ran through newly formed limbs. They felt alien, heavy, attached, yet detached. He attempted to flex a hand, the effort a monumental task. A slow, agonizing stretch. He felt trapped, imprisoned within the cold embrace of the stone. There was a sense of self, dim and flickering, a nascent awareness struggling to ignite within the darkness. It was a spark in an endless night. It yearned, though it did not know for what. He tried again. Another twitch, another agonizing pull. His muscles protested, stiff and unyielding. A desperate, silent scream blossomed within his nascent consciousness. A wordless cry for release, for understanding, for something more. It echoed only within the confines of his own being, unheard, unanswered. The stone held him, a granite cradle, cold and unyielding. He was alone. The realization settled upon him with the weight of the mountain itself, a crushing solitude, profound and unsettling. No comforting presence, no guiding hand, only the stone, only the cold, only the silence. His vision cleared, slowly. The world resolved from a blurry haze into a landscape of gray and shadow. The cave was small, cramped. The walls rose around him, slick with moisture, a suffocating enclosure. He was born from stone. The concept flickered through his emerging thoughts like a dying ember. Born, but into what? Into this endless, echoing stillness? Another twitch. This time, a little stronger. A tremor that ran through his entire form. A sliver of gold. A single ray of sunlight pierced the darkness, a fragile spear of light lancing through a crack in the cave ceiling. It illuminated the very stone he had emerged from. The stone pulsed with a dull, internal glow. Wukong, or whatever he would someday be called, fixated on it. An instinct, primal and undeniable, took hold. A deep, wordless longing pulled him towards the light. It was a beacon, a promise, a desperate hope in a world of gray, away from the stone, away from the suffocating cold, away from the crushing weight of silence. He strained against the granite, muscles burning with unfamiliar exertion. Another, more deliberate movement. A slow, agonizing shift. He felt a sliver of stone break away, a tiny victory in a battle against immobility. The light beckoned, a pull so fundamental it bypassed thought. It was a yearning for something he couldn't name, something beyond the stone, beyond the silence, beyond the cold. He pushed. A larger piece of stone fractured. Dust rained down upon him. The scent of damp earth intensified, momentarily overwhelming the chill. He was moving, slowly, painfully, but moving. The light grew brighter, closer. He could feel its warmth on his skin, a faint caress against the cold stone. It was a fragile thing, that ray of sunlight, a delicate thread connecting him to a world he didn't know. But it was enough. He lunged. A final crack, a shower of debris, and then he was free. He lay gasping on the damp earth, blinking against the sudden brightness. The stone remained behind him, a monolithic testament to his origin, a cold, silent sentinel. He was out. But the solitude remained. It clung to him like the scent of moss, a constant companion in this strange, new world. He looked back at the stone, a vast, silent presence. Did it feel anything? He didn't know. He was alone, and utterly, irrevocably, lost. The air tasted of damp stone and pine needles. A silence, profound and absolute, settled upon Wukong. It wasn't merely the absence of sound. It was a weight pressing against his skin. He moved slowly. Each step across the moss-covered ground felt like a trespass. He hadn't intended to wander so far. The initial burst of freedom, the violent shedding of his past that had propelled him. Now, a quiet exhaustion permeated his limbs, a weariness that settled not in his muscles, but in his soul. The mountain rose around him, a gray, unwavering presence. Its slopes blurred into mist. It felt old, ancient beyond comprehension. He, a creature of chaos and rebellion, felt small within its vastness, insignificant. He stumbled upon it unexpectedly. A clearing choked with vines. The stone beneath was cracked, worn smooth by centuries of rain and wind. A shrine, or what remained of one. It was crumbling, almost swallowed by the relentless growth. Stone fragments lay scattered. The roof had long collapsed, but the faint outline of carved figures remained visible on the weathered walls. A sense of something missing resonated within the space. He didn't understand. He couldn't name what he felt. It wasn't a memory. It was an echo, a lingering sadness, potent and inexplicable, a sense of profound loss, as if a precious thing had been stolen from the mountain itself. Something vital. He reached out, tracing a crumbling inscription. The stone was cold, damp against his fingers. The symbols were eroded, almost illegible. He recognized no deity, no known name, just a suggestion of reverence, of devotion. Who had worshipped here? What had they sought? The questions hung unanswered in the air. The silence deepened. He felt a pang in his chest, a dull ache of empathy for a forgotten faith. He turned away. The weight of the shrine seemed to follow him. Further on, the mountain opened into a small, sheltered valley, Two cranes stood there, ancient, impossibly so. Their plumage was faded, tinged with the gray of the stone. Their movements were deliberate, slow, painfully slow. They watched him. Their eyes, dark and knowing, held a depth of sadness that mirrored the emptiness growing within him. Centuries of watching, of witnessing the rise and fall of things he couldn't even fathom. He felt exposed, vulnerable, judged. He averted his gaze, tried to quicken his pace. The effort felt clumsy, awkward, like a child attempting to mimic the movements of an adult. The wind rustled the leaves, a mournful sigh through the pines. It carried something else, a sound, fleeting, almost imperceptible, laughter, a phantom echo, distant, joyful. It rose and fell on the breeze, a brief, crystalline fragment of sound, a memory that wasn't his, a feeling he'd never experienced. The laughter faded, leaving behind a gaping silence, a void. He stopped, listened, but there was nothing, only the relentless murmur of the wind, only the oppressive weight of the mountain. The sound had stirred something within him, a longing, a yearning for something he couldn't define, something bright and warm and lost. He remembered the battles, the triumphs, the anger, the defiance. None of it felt substantial now. Hollow, empty. He felt bereft. The valley seemed to shrink. The trees pressed closer. The mountain loomed larger. He was a speck, a fleeting anomaly in a landscape that had existed long before him, and would continue to exist long after he was gone. He sat down on a damp rock. The cold seeped into his bones. The silence wrapped around him, a suffocating embrace. He closed his eyes, tried to conjure the heat of battle, the thrill of transformation, but all he felt was the chill of the stone, the weight of the mountain, the lingering echo of laughter. He was alone, utterly and profoundly alone, not just in this valley, not just on this mountain, but in the vast, indifferent expanse of existence, a single, insignificant being, lost within the echoes of ages. He opened his eyes, stared up at the gray sky. It offered no comfort, no answers, only the promise of more silence, more emptiness, more mountain. He stood up, resumed his wandering, not knowing where he was going, not caring, just moving, a shadow amongst shadows, an echo amongst echoes. The wind tasted of frost, even at that altitude, a thin, biting cold that seeped into the bones. It clung to the slopes of Flower Fruit Mountain, a silent, persistent ache. Wukong, oblivious, hummed a tuneless melody. He polished a particularly vibrant peony, its petals the color of sunrise. Then he saw him. A figure descended, not leaping like the mountain sprites, nor soaring like the eagles. A slow, deliberate descent, dust swirled with each step. A celestial messenger. His robes the color of faded jade. He looked heavy. He paused at the base of the mountain, a posture of practiced formality. His face, though handsome in the classical celestial way, was etched with a profound weariness. His eyes, once undoubtedly brilliant, now held a dullness, a film of disillusionment. He bowed, a shallow, perfunctory gesture. "Monkey King," he said, his voice a low murmur. It carried little warmth. "I bring a summons." Wukong straightened, his tail twitching with excitement. A summons. He'd always dreamt of being noticed, of being recognized beyond the confines of his mountain. Surely, this was it? An invitation from the heavens? He asked, unable to keep the eagerness from his voice. He imagined feasts, glorious ceremonies, the chance to learn from the true gods. The messenger inclined his head. From the Jade Emperor himself, he consulted a scroll, its silken surface shimmering in the fading light. "By decree, you are to present yourself at the Hall of Clarity." He read the words, each syllable carefully measured, a complex web of phrases designed to convey authority, not meaning. Wukong heard only the promise of joining the celestial court. A grand adventure awaited. He began to prepare. He gathered wildflowers, clusters of bellflowers, lavender, and the luminous moon orchid. A garland fit for an emperor, surely. He tried to fashion garments from woven leaves and vines, something befitting the occasion. They were clumsy, simple, but earnest. He smoothed them meticulously. The messenger watched, his expression unreadable. Wukong chattered, recounting tales of his exploits, defeating demons, rescuing villagers. Each story embellished, each victory magnified. He spoke of his skill, his strength, his potential. The messenger remained silent, a statue carved from jade. He offered the messenger a handful of glistening peaches, ripened on the mountain. "A gift," Wukong said, beaming. For the heavens, the messenger accepted one, slowly. He didn't eat it. He merely held it, turning it over in his fingers. A gesture devoid of joy. "The journey is long," the messenger finally said. His voice was still flat, devoid of inflection. "Follow the path of the celestial currents. You will be guided." Wukong nodded, already picturing the glittering palaces, the endless procession of deities. He felt a surge of anticipation. He was going to be one of them. He started toward the path, his garland swinging. He glanced back. The messenger hadn't moved. He stood there, silhouetted against the dying light. And then, for the briefest of moments, Wukong saw something flicker in his eyes. Not admiration, not welcome. Something else. A shadow, a fleeting expression of pity, or perhaps fear. Wukong frowned. He couldn't quite place it. The messenger cleared his throat. "Go well, Monkey King." Then he turned and ascended the mountain, disappearing quickly, as if eager to leave. The sound of his footsteps faded into the deepening twilight. The wind seemed to sigh, carrying the scent of frost and something unsettling. Wukong stood for a long time, staring at the empty space where the messenger had been. The wildflower garland felt heavy in his hand. The simple garments itched. He felt a tremor, not of the mountain, but within himself, a seed of unease, planted in the fertile ground of his youthful optimism. He didn't understand it. Not yet. He resumed his journey, the path of the celestial currents. He followed it blindly. The sun dipped below the horizon. Darkness consumed the world. The flowers felt cold. The peaches, suddenly, tasted bland. The hall of clarity loomed ahead. A vast, imposing structure, carved from an obsidian-like stone. Its sheer scale dwarfed the surrounding landscape. It seemed to absorb the light, to radiate an almost palpable indifference. Wukong quickened his pace. He told himself it was anticipation, a longing for glory. But deep down, a small voice whispered, a voice tinged with a growing sense of foreboding. Something wasn't right. He didn't understand why. Not yet. He only felt a creeping chill, a sense of being observed, a sense that he was not being welcomed. He was merely summoned. And the silence that surrounded the hall was not the silence of celebration. It was the silence of judgment. The gates loomed. Not wood, not stone, jade, shimmering, impossibly vast. They pulsed with a faint, internal light, a cold luminescence. Wukong felt a tremor, not of the earth, but within himself. He'd felled demons, battled dragons. This was different. He passed through. The sheer scale of the Jade Emperor's palace stole his breath. It wasn't a palace, really. More a city of gold and jade. Every surface gleamed, a dizzying, relentless gleam. Towers spiraled upwards, lost in a perpetual, misty twilight. Bridges arched, crafted from spun moonlight, I imagined. But the beauty was hollow. It lacked warmth. It lacked the pulse of life. Instead, it felt sterile, cold, impersonal. He'd expected splendor, yes, but not this oppressive weight, a suffocating luxury. He shuffled forward, his fur brushing against meticulously sculpted hedges. Their fragrance, an exotic blend of lotus and amber, was overpowering. Too sweet, artificial. It clung to him, a perfumed cage. Each step echoed, a lonely sound in the immense stillness. He saw them then, celestials, countless, draped in silks of impossible hues, their faces serene masks. They moved with an unnerving grace, gliding rather than walking, eyes fixed on some distant, unknowable point. He tried to meet their gaze. They didn't. Or if they did, it was a fleeting, dismissive glance. He attempted a bow, a respectful inclination of his head. It felt awkward, clumsy. His movements, honed in the wild mountains, felt jarring in this rarefied air. A ripple of amusement passed through the gathered ranks, thinly veiled, certainly, but undeniable. He was led to the audience hall. The floor was polished jade. It reflected the light in fractured rainbows, disorienting. He focused on a single point. The throne, vast, carved from a single piece of jadeite. The Jade Emperor himself sat upon it, immobile, an ageless visage, a gaze that seemed to penetrate him. The celestial officials lined the walls. Their expressions were impenetrable. He offered another bow. "Greetings, great Jade Emperor," he mumbled. The words felt small, insignificant. A dry cough echoed from the far end of the hall. One of the officials, a slender being in flowing turquoise robes, spoke. His voice, polished and precise, lacked any inflection. The stone monkey. A unique acquisition. Wukong felt a flush of anger. He bit back a retort. He would play their game. "For now, I am honored to be in your presence," he replied, forcing a pleasant tone. The words tasted like ash in his mouth. More laughter, muted, controlled, but undeniably mocking. He saw it in their eyes, a condescension he hadn't anticipated. This wasn't the welcoming embrace he'd envisioned. This wasn't paradise. He watched. Then, with a new clarity, the meticulous order, the rigid protocols, the subtle power plays, each celestial's position carefully defined, each interaction choreographed. There was no freedom here, only duty and obedience. His gaze fell upon a lower, ranking deity, a small, trembling figure tending to a brazier. He wore simple robes, faded and patched. He was barely noticed, lost in the grandeur. Wukong saw his lips move, a silent prayer, whispered into the flickering flames, a prayer for survival, for favor, for simply being allowed to continue existing. The soundless plea struck him with the force of a physical blow. He felt a cold dread seep into his bones. This wasn't divinity. This was a gilded cage. The Jade Emperor spoke. His voice resonated through the hall, calm, detached. The monkey has demonstrated strength and a certain resourcefulness. He paused. He will be put to use. Use, like a tool, a pawn. He thought of the mountains, of freedom, of the wind in his fur. A wave of disillusionment washed over him. He had sought the heavens. He'd believed in a higher purpose, a realm of perfect harmony. He looked at the Jade Emperor's impassive face, at the smirking officials, at the broken, supplicating deity. This was not the paradise he imagined. This was something far more complex and far more terrifying. The silence stretched, heavy, oppressive. He bowed again, a deeper bow this time, a bow of resignation, of quiet despair. He wondered if he could ever find his way back to the wild, untamed spaces he once called home. He doubted it. The scent of lotus and amber clung to him still, a constant reminder of his gilded captivity. The paradise was a lie, and he was trapped within it. The wind tasted of dust, and something else, something sterile, metallic. It clung to the fine hairs on my arms, a constant, unwelcome touch. The garden stretched before me, an endless expanse of jade and emerald. Row upon row, identical blooms swayed in unison. Mandrakes, meticulously pruned, lotus blossoms, perfect and unwavering. It was my task to tend them, to ensure their flawless uniformity. The sun beat down, relentless. Sweat slicked my brow, blurring the already monotonous landscape. Each movement felt heavy, deliberate. The soil clung to my calloused hands, cool and damp. A faint scent rose from the earth, a sweetness tinged with an unsettling stillness. It was the smell of absolute order. Days bled into each other. Sunrise, tending. Sunset, tending. The repetition was a slow suffocation, a pressure building in my chest. I tried to recall the vibrant chaos of the mountain, the wild tang of freedom, but those memories felt distant, fragile. My arms ached. My back screamed in protest. Each identical plant felt like a condemnation, a silent accusation of my inherent wildness. Were all the heavens like this? A meticulously arranged prison? I paused, leaning against a weathered stone bench. The coolness against my skin offered a fleeting reprieve. Above me, the sky was an almost painful blue, too vast, too clean. One of the immortals, Lan Kai-He, approached. She carried a flute, its silver surface gleaming in the sunlight. A melancholy tune drifted from its holes, a sound both beautiful and deeply sad. "You seem troubled, Wukong," she said, her voice soft. I hesitated. Was it safe? Could I voice the unrest simmering within me? The garden, it feels endless. I finally managed. And the flowers, they all look the same. She smiled, a slow, patronizing curve of her lips. It is the harmony, Wukong, the balance. Heaven thrives on order. Her words were like a cold wind, stripping away any lingering warmth. But isn't there room for difference? I pressed. For something wild. The smile widened, becoming brittle. Wildness is chaos. Chaos disrupts the flow. Obedience is the path to enlightenment. She spoke with the casual certainty of one who had never questioned the foundation upon which their existence was built. The flute's melody grew more mournful. It seemed to echo my own burgeoning despair. I lowered my gaze, feeling the weight of her pronouncements settle upon me. A heavy cloak of disappointment. Later, I saw it. A minor celestial being. A young scribe, barely more than a boy. He had misplaced a scroll. A single, insignificant scroll. The punishment was swift, public, humiliating. The chief scribe, a being of immense power and authority, berated the boy. His voice boomed across the courtyard. The boy's face crumpled, his shoulders shaking. Other celestial beings averted their gaze, pretending not to notice. The boy's tears left trails on his dusty cheeks. Each droplet seemed to carry the weight of an eternity. A wave of anger surged through me. A hot, visceral anger unlike anything I had felt since escaping the mountain. It wasn't simply anger at the boy's suffering. It was anger at the system, at the rigid, unyielding structure that allowed such cruelty to flourish. It was a feeling I hadn't anticipated, a feeling of defiance. My fingers clenched into fists. The soil beneath my nails dug into my skin. A small, prickly sensation, a reminder of the earth, of the wildness I had once known. The serene beauty of the garden now felt oppressive, a suffocating reminder of the conformity demanded of me. The perfectly aligned blossoms seemed to mock my growing unrest. I looked back towards the courtyard. The boy was being escorted away. His head hung low, something shifted within me, a tiny, defiant spark. I would tend the garden. I would obey the immortals, but a seed had been planted, a seed of doubt, of questioning, of rebellion. It was small, fragile, but it was there, and it pulsed with a quiet, growing power. The dust continued to taste of metal, but now I thought I could taste something else too, something like resolve. The dust swirled, a fine gray film coating everything. It settled on his fur, on the stones he was polishing, on the heavy silence that permeated the celestial forge. A silence broken only by the rhythmic rasp of his own movements. Endless polishing, endless. It was a task designed for the most mundane of spirits, something to strip away any lingering ambition, any spark of individuality. But it clung to him, stubbornly, a primal fire banked deep within. Each pass of the cloth felt like an erasure, of memory, of self. He remembered the mountains, the playful chases, the boundless sky, gone. Now, just this dull, aching servitude. His fingers ached, his shoulders screamed. The scent of pulverized stone filled his nostrils, a gritty, suffocating perfume. He paused, just for a moment, to breathe, to remember what it felt like to feel. It had been weeks, months, perhaps. Time blurred under the weight of his duties. They called him Sun Wukong, a designation devoid of the mischievous grin, the defiant spirit, just Wukong, a name whispered with a faint contempt. Another celestial passed, barely glancing his way, a flicker of superiority in their eyes, another reminder of his place. A place far below the shimmering palaces, the endless feasts, the songs of the immortals. He lowered his head, forcing himself to resume the polishing. The stone offered no solace, no understanding, only the relentless, unforgiving demand for perfection. A sharp, stinging humiliation coiled in his gut. It wasn't just the task itself. It was the realization, a bone, deep understanding that he was trapped, not by celestial chains, but by his own acquiescence, his own silent agreement to this slow, crushing defeat. The shame tasted bitter on his tongue, a metallic tang, like old blood. Then it began, a tremor deep within his core, a low hum that resonated through his bones. It wasn't pain. It was something else, something ancient, something suppressed. The energy surged, a molten river erupting within him. He stumbled, dropping the polishing cloth. It lay crumpled on the stone, a symbol of his broken submission. He clenched his fists. The stone beneath his feet vibrated. A wave of raw, untamed power coursed through his veins. He could feel the mountains calling to him, the wind whispering forgotten freedoms. It was a terrifying sensation, like being torn apart and remade simultaneously, a violent upheaval of everything he had become, or rather, everything they had forced him to become. The air crackled, the celestial instruments lining the walls, gongs, chimes, intricate wind harps began to shake. Then, with a series of sharp cracks, they shattered, a chorus of destruction echoing through the forge. A blinding light erupted from his body, not a gentle radiance, but a harsh, searing luminescence that pulsed with unbearable intensity. It washed over the forge, momentarily obliterating everything in its path. The smell of ozone filled the air. He felt his body shifting, expanding, becoming something other. His fur darkened, hardened. His limbs grew stronger. A crown of fiery gold materialized upon his head. The light subsided, revealing a figure transformed. The great sage equal to heaven, no longer the playful Monkey King, but a being of immense power, radiating both terror and breathtaking majesty. A profound sadness settled over him. It wasn't triumph he felt. Not yet. It was a desperate grief. The grief of a creature unbound, but adrift, separated from all he had known. He turned. His gaze swept across the shattered remnants of the forge, the terrified faces of the celestial beings, and then he saw her, a young woman, barely more than a girl, standing near a broken window. Her robes were a simple shade of azure, her face, pale in the fading light. Their eyes met. For a fleeting moment, the chaos receded. The anger quieted. He saw not condemnation in her gaze, but sorrow, a profound, heartbreaking sorrow. She offered no words, only a silent, mournful farewell, a silent acknowledgement of the innocence he was abandoning. It was a single, fragile moment of connection, a reminder of the world he was leaving behind, a world he would likely never return to. He bowed his head, a gesture of reluctant respect. Then, with a final, earth-shattering leap, he burst through the shattered window. The heavens faded behind him, replaced by the vast, indifferent expanse of the night sky. The rain began to fall, cold, relentless, washing away the dust, washing away the remnants of his former self. A cleansing storm of rebellion, a prelude to an uncertain future, a future forged in defiance and steeped in regret. The wind tasted of pine, a dry, brittle scent. It sliced through him, not with malice, but with a cold indifference. He walked through the 100,000 mountains, a name grand, boastful, yet the reality was simply stone and scrub. And in echoing silence, the gray dust clung to his fur, a fine powder. It settled on his shoulders. It layered in the grooves of his brow. He brushed at it, but it returned, relentless, like the feeling in his chest, a hollow ache. He had left the jade halls, left the endless debate, left the simmering resentment, the stifled laughter. It felt like escaping a cage. Yet, this was not freedom. This was a vastness, a blankness. The mountains rose, jagged teeth against a perpetually overcast sky, each peak the same as the last, each valley mirroring the previous one. The landscape offered no solace, no comfort, just repetition, an endless cycle of stone and sky. His own footsteps seemed too loud, each pad of his paws a deliberate intrusion. He wanted to fade, to become part of the gray, to disappear into the rock. but he was too brightly colored, too present. He paused, leaning against a lichen-covered boulder. The cold seeped into his bones. He felt it there, deep down, a chilling absence. He remembered the warmth of the peach garden, the bustling energy, the connection. He shivered. How long had he been wandering? Days? Weeks? Time blurred, each moment indistinguishable from the last. He descended into a valley. There, nestled between the unforgiving slopes, lay a village, a cluster of weathered huts. Smoke rose languidly from the chimneys, a thin, gray plume. The scent changed here. It was no longer just pine. There was a dampness, a stagnant odor, of unwashed clothes, of sickness, of despair. He saw them, the villagers, thin faces, hollow eyes. They moved with a weary resignation. Children played listlessly, kicking at dust. He approached. He tried to smile. It felt brittle. Foreign, greetings, he offered. His voice sounded too loud, too cheerful. They stared at him, their expressions unreadable. He saw a young woman struggling to carry a pail of water. It was heavy. She stumbled. He moved to assist her. Too quickly. He bumped into her, spilling the water. She flinched. He saw a flicker of anger in her eyes. Then a weary sadness. "Be careful," she murmured, her voice raspy. He tried again. He offered to mend a broken roof. He attempted to help a farmer repair a failing fence. Each attempt ended in failure. His strength was too great, his touch too rough. He only managed to exacerbate the problems. He retreated, back into the shadows. He watched them. He felt a familiar weight settle in his stomach. Inadequacy. He, the great sage equal to heaven, could not alleviate their suffering. They were suffering, and he was simply a brightly colored stranger. Passing through, further down the road, he encountered a monk, old, bent, wrapped in simple gray robes. He sat beside a small stream, meditating. Wukong approached cautiously. The monk opened his eyes. They were deep pools, reflecting the gray sky. "You seem troubled," the monk observed. His voice was low, calm. I wonder," Wukong admitted. The words felt clumsy, insufficient. The monk smiled faintly. "The mountains hold many answers, but they rarely speak plainly." "What answers?" Wukong asked. He felt a desperate hope bloom within him. Perhaps this was a guide, a teacher. The monk simply pointed towards the mountains. "Look deeper. The answers are not to be found in words, but in the spaces between them." He said nothing else. He returned to his meditation, leaving Wukong staring at the peaks, the spaces between words. What did he mean? The wind picked up again, whispering through the pines, a mournful sound. He felt a surge of frustration. The world was vast, indifferent. He was adrift. He walked on, deeper into the 100,000 mountains, searching, not knowing what he sought, knowing only that he was alone and profoundly, utterly lost. The scent of pine and decay lingered on the wind, a constant reminder of the world's slow, relentless passage, a world that did not need him, did not notice him, and he, in turn, felt himself fading, becoming just another shadow, lost among the stone, lost among the sky, lost in the echoing silence. The rain tasted of ash. It clung to his fur, a film of gray mirroring the weight in his chest. He hadn't meant to break the stall, just the man's tone, the casual dismissal, monkey filth, he'd hissed, spitting on the ground near Wukong's paws. A flicker, a heat, then shattering wood and spilled plums, a chaotic dance of overturned baskets. The merchant, a small man, had screamed. Wukong felt the surge of power, a terrible blossoming within him. He hadn't controlled it. Not really. He'd fled, of course. The scent of bruised fruit and fear lingered, a heavy perfume in the damp air. He'd intended only to silence the man, to extinguish the insult. But the plums, the shattered stall, it was more than that. It was a destruction born of a hurt too deep to articulate. Regret, cold and sharp, pierced the lingering embers of anger. He tasted it, bitter on his tongue. He sought the mountains, high peaks veiled in mist, offering some semblance of solitude. The silence, however, was not a balm. It amplified the echoes of the merchant's words, amplified the cries of the villagers. A rustling, a voice smooth as polished jade. Lost. Little monkey? He hadn't sensed the demon's approach. A foolish oversight, a sign, perhaps, of his unraveling. The demon, a creature of shifting shadows and subtle smiles, introduced himself as Yuren. He spoke of Wukong's reputation, his legendary strength, such raw power. Wasted, Yuren observed, his eyes gleaming in the dim light. Wukong bristled. He resented the assessment. He felt the familiar pull of validation, a craving he'd thought long buried. Yuren offered a proposition, a challenge, a tournament amongst the lesser demons. Glory awaited the victor. Recognitions, power solidified. It was a subtle trap, a gilded cage. Wukong knew it instinctively. Yet, the temptation, that insidious whisper in his ear, proved too strong. He'd felt the scorn of the heavens, the isolation of his imprisonment. He yearned to prove himself, to be seen. He accepted. The arena was a desolate bowl carved into the heart of a mountain. The air hung thick with the scent of sulfur and anticipation, a paltry gathering of lesser demons, their forms grotesque and eager. They viewed him with a mixture of fear and contempt. The fighting was easy, brutal, too easy. Each victory fueled the fire within him. He moved with a speed and ferocity he hadn't known he possessed. Each strike unleashed a torrent of raw energy. The ground trembled, but with each blow, the satisfaction diminished. The cheers of the demons sounded hollow. He felt empty. Yuren watched from a shadowed balcony, a silent puppeteer orchestrating his descent. The final demon fell. A grotesque, multi-limbed creature, its essence extinguished in a flash of blinding light. The arena fell silent. Then a ragged cheer erupted. Urine descended, a predatory grace in his movements. Impressive little monkey, he purred. Truly impressive. He extended a hand. A gesture of what? Respect? Deceit? Wukong hesitated. The shadows surrounding Urine seemed to deepen. He saw, for the first time, the subtle manipulation in the demon's eyes, the calculated indifference. He felt a tremor in the earth, a low, guttural growl that vibrated through his bones. The mountains themselves seemed to shudder. A rival, a more powerful demon, drawn by the disturbance. A battle erupted, a clash of titans that tore the landscape asunder. Mountains crumbled, rivers diverted, forests burned. The air crackled with raw power. Wukong fought with a desperate fury. He unleashed every ounce of his being, but it wasn't enough. He was outmatched, outmaneuvered. The destruction was staggering. He saw it in the aftermath. A wasteland of scorched earth and shattered stone, the screams of the wounded, the wails of the dying. He stumbled through the ruins. The rain returned, a cold, relentless deluge. It washed the grime from his fur, but could not cleanse the stain from his soul. A young girl, clutching a broken doll, stared up at him with wide, frightened eyes. Her face was streaked with tears and soot. He saw his own reflection in her gaze. A monster, a destroyer. The anger was gone, replaced by a bone-deep weariness and a chilling realization. He was no better than the demons he fought. He was just another force of destruction, driven by impulses he couldn't control. He turned and fled, deeper into the mountains, leaving behind the wreckage, the sorrow, the terrible, echoing silence. He ran, not toward peace, but toward a darkness that mirrored the one within him. The ash rain continued to fall, and he knew, with a certainty that settled like a stone in his gut, that the cycle would begin again. The world dissolved, not with a bang, but a sigh, a slow, deliberate fading of the familiar grit and grime of his existence. He was falling, or perhaps floating. It was difficult to discern. He felt the absence of the wind, the sting of the rain. Gone were the phantom aches in his shoulders, the constant thrum of restless energy beneath his skin. A profound quiet settled, a quiet unlike any he'd known. Then she appeared, not with fanfare, not with a blinding light. She simply was, seated upon a lotus blossom, adrift in a mist. Leaden sea, a sea of silver. Her face, a landscape of gentle serenity. Her eyes, pools of boundless compassion. Guanyin. He knew the name, whispered on the winds, etched into ancient scrolls. The Bodhisattva of mercy. He'd always dismissed it as another human fancy, another attempt to tame the world with gentle words. Now, he was face to face with it. The air tasted of rain and jasmine, a scent he couldn't place, yet recognized deep within. A faint, aching familiarity. Her presence radiated a stillness that pressed against him, a tangible weight, a comforting weight. She did not speak. Not initially. She simply looked at him. He saw no judgment in those eyes, no condemnation, only observation. A deep, unwavering observation that felt more profound than any battle he'd ever faced. He remembered the chaos, the endless cycle of rebellion, of mischief, of unchecked power, the countless lives disrupted, the pain inflicted, the fury he'd worn like armor. It felt distant now, a dream within a dream. "You rage," she finally said. Her voice was not a sound so much as a resonance, a vibration that moved within his bones. But what fuels the fire? The question landed like a stone. It cracked something fragile within him, something he'd buried long ago, the fragile remnants of a monkey who yearned for acceptance. He wanted to bristle, to retort, to unleash a torrent of justifications. But the words caught in his throat. He felt exposed. "Power," he finally mumbled. The word felt hollow, a flimsy shield against the weight of her gaze. "Power is a tool," she responded, her voice unchanging. "It can build, it can destroy. The hand that wields it determines its purpose. You have wielded it with abandon." He saw the faces then, not vividly, not clearly. Fragments, a startled merchant, a grieving widow, a frightened child, each one a silent accusation, each one a shard of guilt lodged in his heart. He closed his eyes. The images intensified, the weight of them pressed down on him, suffocating. He wanted to flinch, to recoil, but he remained still, trapped in the stillness of her presence. He felt a tremor run through him, a deep, visceral ache. It was not physical pain. It was regret, a foreign and unwelcome sensation. She offered him no solace, no easy promises of redemption, just the unwavering gaze, the silent invitation to examine the wreckage of his past. When he awoke, the dream lingered, not as a memory, but as a presence, a shadow that clung to the edges of his consciousness. The mountain felt different, the air heavier, the familiar rustle of leaves, a somber lament. He attempted meditation, a clumsy, desperate attempt to quiet the storm within. He sat cross, legged upon a moss-covered stone. He closed his eyes. His mind, however, refused to be still. Images flashed, battles, feasts, taunts, the mocking laughter of the Jade Emperor. He squeezed his eyes tighter. He focused on his breath. In, out, the rhythm felt shallow, inadequate. Memories bubbled up. A distant forest, a loving mother, the ache of abandonment, the raw, desperate need for belonging. Why had he chosen this path? Why this endless cycle of rebellion? Was it truly about power? Or was it about something else? Something buried so deep, he'd forgotten it existed. He felt a wave of frustration wash over him. He clenched his fists. He wanted to break something, to shatter the stillness. But then he remembered her face, the serene compassion, the unwavering gaze. He took a deep breath, and another. The turmoil didn't disappear. It simply shifted. The sharp edges softened. The fury lessened. He still didn't understand. He still didn't know if forgiveness was possible, but for the first time in centuries, he felt a flicker of something other than rage, a tentative hope, a fragile seed of change. It was small, vulnerable, easily crushed, but it was there. And in the quiet stillness of the mountain, under the watchful gaze of the fading sun, Wukong felt the weight of a lifetime. And for the first time, he dared to wonder if he could carry it. The dust settled, a fine gray film upon everything. It clung to the leaves of the gnarled peach trees, muted the vibrant hues of the wildflowers. The air, thick with the scent of damp earth and decaying blossoms, hung heavy. He'd grown accustomed to this quietude, to the solitude. A familiar comfort. A figure approached, slowly, deliberately. It was him, Tang Sanzang. Wukong watched, arms crossed, a stone within a forest. The monk's robes, a pale saffron, seemed to absorb the light, a stark contrast to the riotous green surrounding them. He looked frail, remarkably so, not the formidable warrior he'd envisioned. The greeting was clumsy, awkward. Greetings, Tang Sanzang offered, his voice thin, reedy, great sage, equal to heaven. Wukong grunted, a sound devoid of warmth. Monk. The monk inclined his head, an almost hesitant movement. I am Tang Sanzang. I seek your aid. Wukong's eyes narrowed. Aid? For what? The words tasted like ash in his mouth. For the scriptures, Tang Sanzang replied. He adjusted the worn prayer beads around his wrist. The sutras of the West, to bring enlightenment to the Middle Kingdom. He saw the monk's earnestness, yet it grated, this quiet devotion, this unwavering faith. It felt naive, like a fragile candle flame in a howling storm. And you believe I, a rebel, a troublemaker, am suited to guard you? Wukong's laughter was short, bitter. It echoed strangely amongst the trees. Tang Sanzang did not flinch. His gaze remained fixed, unwavering. Guanyin, Bodhisattva believes you are capable of redemption and protection. Redemption, a word that echoed with painful irony. Protection. He was a creature of chaos, of rebellion. What protection could he offer? The silence stretched, a palpable weight. The wind rustled the leaves, a whispering condemnation. Tang Sanzang took a step closer. His sandals sunk slightly into the soft earth. The journey will be arduous. Demons of all kinds will test us. He began to describe them, each one a manifestation of darkness, of temptation. The spider demons, weaving illusions to ensnare the unwary. The bull demon king, fueled by brute force and ancient rage. The seductive Naga princesses, promising eternal pleasure. His voice, though quiet, gained strength. A quiet determination began to bleed into his tone. It was a strange, unsettling sound, not the booming pronouncements of authority, but a steady, resilient hum. We will face trials that will push us to our limits. There will be hunger, exhaustion, despair. Tang Sanzang paused. He looked directly at Wukong. There will be moments when you will question your purpose, when you will want to abandon this quest. Wukong felt a tremor run through him. A chilling recognition. The memory surfaced, unbidden. The image of Guanyin, serene and compassionate, her eyes filled with a sorrow that mirrored his own. He'd been adrift, a storm of resentment and anger, until her gentle hand had guided him, offered him a chance, a purpose. He thought of the endless expanse of the mountains, of the freedom to roam, to shape his own destiny, to remain a solitary force. The comfort of solitude beckoned, a warm embrace, to return to the mountains, to the familiar ache of loneliness. But Guanyin's compassion lingered, a faint ember in the cold recesses of his heart. A profound weariness settled over him. It was a burden he hadn't anticipated. This responsibility, this connection. He thought of the countless suffering souls that Tang Sanzong wished to alleviate, the darkness that clung to the land. He remembered the violence, the injustice, the endless cycle of pain. Could he, a creature of chaos, truly bring about change? He looked at the monk, so small, so vulnerable, yet so resolute. The weight of it all settled upon him, the sheer impossibility of the task, the perilous path that lay ahead, a path fraught with danger and despair. He took a deep breath. The scent of damp earth filled his lungs. It was the smell of responsibility, of commitment, of a future he hadn't chosen. "Very well," Wukong said, his voice rough. "I will accompany you, but do not expect miracles. I am not a saint." He averted his gaze. The words felt hollow, inadequate. The monk's face softened. A faint smile touched his lips. "It was a fragile thing, easily broken. I understand." Tang Sanzang said quietly, "My faith rests not in miracles, but in perseverance." And in that moment, Wukong realized he was no longer alone. But the weight remained, a heavy, silent burden. The pilgrimage had begun. The dust settled on everything, a fine, gray film clinging to robes, skin, and the edges of the worn path. It tasted of ash and old regrets. Wukong walked, not with the practiced lightness of the pilgrim, but with a leaden weight in his limbs. The mountains grew steeper. The silence, heavier still. It had been years since he'd truly considered the echoes of his past. Years spent burying them under layers of discipline, of chanted sutras and dutiful protection of Tang Sanzang. He'd believed, perhaps foolishly, that the pain could be outgrown. That time, like water, would erode the sharp edges of his anger. He was wrong. The village appeared without fanfare. A cluster of weathered homes huddled against the foothills. Smoke curled from chimneys, thin ribbons against the vast, indifferent sky. A mundane scene. Yet, something within Wukong tightened. A subtle tremor in the familiar bedrock of his control. He felt her before he saw her. A wave of recognition. A sorrow so profound it seemed to seep from the very earth. She was selling rice cakes. A small table set beside the road, a cloth faded to a dusty brown. Her face, etched with lines deeper than her years, held a stillness that bordered on resignation. He knew her. He remembered the vibrant spark in her eyes, the way she laughed, a sound as bright as wind chimes. Lin. His hand instinctively tightened on his staff. He hadn't seen her since the chaos, the rampage, the pointless, blinding fury. He averted his gaze. The practiced composure of the pilgrim felt brittle, a thin veneer over a churning storm. Tang Sanzang stopped beside him. "We will rest here, Wukong," he said, his voice gentle. "The village seems peaceful." Wukong didn't respond. He couldn't. He watched Lin as she carefully arranged the rice cakes. Each movement deliberate, measured. Years of bearing a weight he himself had inflicted. She looked up then. Her eyes, once full of life, were now pools of shadowed gray. She didn't speak. She simply looked at him. A gaze that held no accusation, no anger. Only a quiet, heartbreaking sadness. The silence stretched, taut and unbearable. It felt like an eternity condensed into a single, agonizing moment. His carefully cultivated indifference fractured. The dam he had so painstakingly built crumbled. A rush of memories flooded him. The heat of his rage, the blinding chaos, the devastation, the lives disrupted. He saw Lin's home reduced to rubble. He heard the cries of children. He felt the tremor of the earth as his uncontrolled power ripped through the village. He wanted to disappear, to sink into the earth and be swallowed whole. Wukong. Tang Sanzang's voice was a quiet anchor in the storm of his emotions. He forced a shaky breath. I need some air," he mumbled, turning away. He stumbled towards the edge of the village, away from Lin, away from the ghost of his past. The shame was a physical weight. It pressed down on him, stealing his breath. The impulsive Monkey King, the trickster, the rebel, roared within him. He wanted to lash out, to deny, to blame. But he couldn't. He sat heavily on a moss-covered stone. The air hung thick and still. The scent of damp earth and decaying leaves filled his nostrils. A bitter fragrance. He closed his eyes. The images persisted. The destruction. Lin's face. The echo of her silenced laughter. It was senseless, he whispered to the wind. A childish outburst. A pathetic display of power. He felt a hand on his shoulder. Tang Sanzang. His touch was gentle, grounding. "The past is a heavy burden, Wukong," Tang Sanzang said softly. "It is true, but it does not define you. It informs you." Wukong opened his eyes. He looked at Tang Sanzang, saw the unwavering kindness in his gaze, the quiet belief. "I caused her so much pain," he said, the words thick with regret. "And so many others. Can it ever be undone?" Tang Sanzang didn't offer easy answers. He didn't offer false promises of immediate forgiveness. He simply sat beside him, a silent presence. "Redemption is not about erasing the past, Wukong," he said finally. "It is about accepting responsibility, about striving to be better, about using your strength to heal, not to harm." He paused. "Look at the path we walk. It is long, arduous, but with each step, with each act of kindness, We move closer to understanding, to peace. Wukong looked back toward the village. He saw Lin still selling her rice cakes, her face still etched with sadness. But something had shifted, a flicker of something almost resilient. He would not approach her. Not yet. The words would not come. The apologies felt hollow, inadequate. But he would stay. He would bear witness to her suffering. He would offer his protection. He would, in whatever small way he could, attempt to ease the burden he had helped create. It would be a long process, a slow, painful journey, but perhaps, just perhaps, it was a beginning of understanding, of acceptance, of a fragile, hesitant hope for a kind of forgiveness, not from others, perhaps, but from himself. The dust settled, the mountains remained, and Wukong, the former king, the errant pilgrim, began to breathe again, a slow, unsteady breath, but a breath nonetheless. The air hung thick, heavy with the scent of sulfur and regret. It clung to Wukong's fur, a damp, unwelcome embrace. He stood before the demon lord, a towering figure wreathed in shadows, not a grand, explosive display of power, just presence, a suffocating weight. The throne room wasn't opulent. It was bleak, stone, cold and unforgiving. The only light came from fissures in the earth, casting long, distorted shadows. Each flicker seemed to mock him. So, the demon lord's voice rasped, a dry wind through brittle leaves. The great hero, reduced. Wukong said nothing. The words, barbed and meant to sting, barely registered. He'd felt worse, much worse. He remembered the endless, lonely expanse of his former domain, the bitter taste of freedom bought with solitude. You still yearn for it, don't you? The demon lord leaned forward. The shadows shifted, revealing a face etched with cruel amusement. The boundless power, the unquestioned authority. A tremor ran through Wukong's hand. He clenched it into a fist, feeling the familiar phantom ache of his staff. Ruyi Jingu Bang, gone, a relic of a past life. He saw it then. The mountain, the cavern, the endless years spent in confinement, his rage a constant companion, the humiliation, the erasure. A whisper, insidious and familiar, coiled in his mind. Reclaim it. Reclaim what is yours. The demon lord smiled, a slow, predatory curve of the lips. I offer you a choice, Wukong, a simple one. Shed this paltry pilgrimage. Embrace your true nature. The offer wasn't veiled. It was blunt, almost casual. A sliver of ice pierced Wukong's heart. He looked down at his hands, scarred and worn, hands that had held a kingdom, hands that now assisted an old monk, the monastery, Xuanzang, the others. Their faces, serene and trusting, flashed before his eyes. He recalled the gentle touch of Zhubajie's hand on his arm, the quiet wisdom in Sha Monk's gaze, even the endless complaints of the pig. He remembered the warmth of the shared meals, the companionship forged in hardship, a fragile, precious thing. He focused on the scent of damp earth rising from Xuanzang's robes. It was a grounding presence, a tether to reality. You seek freedom? The demon lord pressed. True freedom, not this charade of piety. A flicker of something akin to longing twisted within him. He remembered the sheer, exhilarating power of transforming, of shifting forms at will, of commanding the elements, of being unbound. It was tempting, so intensely tempting. The image of the golden peach tree in his former garden bloomed in his mind. He remembered the vibrant colors, the intoxicating scent of ripening fruit, a stolen moment of pure, unadulterated joy. He closed his eyes. A single tear traced a path down his cheek, warm against the cold stone. A tear not of sadness, not exactly. It was recognition. Recognition of the creature he once was, the creature he could still be. He saw himself, bathed in the golden light of his former kingdom, ruling, acknowledged, worshipped. The weight of that vision pressed down on him, suffocating. It was a gilded cage. He opened his eyes. The demon lord watched him, his expression unreadable. What will it be, Monkey King? The title felt like a brand, a reminder of what he'd lost. Wukong looked past the demon lord, past the throne, past the shadows. He saw a reflection of himself in the polished stone floor. A diminished form, but steadier, quieter. He felt a resonance within him, a subtle hum. It wasn't the raw power he'd once possessed. It was something different, something deeper. He took a slow, deliberate breath. The sulphurous air burned in his lungs. "No," he said, his voice a low rumble. It lacked the thunderous force of his former pronouncements, but it was firm, resolute. The demon lord's smile widened, a flash of sharp teeth. "You choose limitation?" Wukong nodded. The movement was small, almost imperceptible, but it felt monumental. The internal battle began, not with explosions and chaos, but with a chilling stillness. A voice, a shadow of his former self, screamed within him. "Don't you understand? This is your chance." But another voice, quieter, more steadfast, countered. "This is not who I am anymore." He fought the phantom sensations, the phantom power, the phantom throne. He focused on the steady rhythm of Xuanzang's breathing, the warmth of Sha Monk's presence, the absurdity of Zhu Baiye's snoring. The shadow of the Monkey King fought to surface, a whirlwind of rage and ambition. Wukong faced it. He acknowledged it. He accepted it. It was not a defeat. It was a letting go. The shadow receded, fading into the depths of his being. Not destroyed, integrated. A part of him, but no longer in control. The demon lord's power surged. A palpable wave of energy crashed against Wukong, testing his resolve. But he didn't falter. He stood, still, unmoving, a single, insignificant figure against the backdrop of ancient darkness. The weight remained, the regret lingered, but beneath it, a quiet strength bloomed, a strength not of power, but of purpose, the final temptation overcome. The air hung thick, heavy with the scent of ozone and damp earth. A lingering echo of the battle, a tremor in the ground, barely perceptible now. It was over, the triumphant cries, the clash of celestial steel, all silenced. He stood, or rather, remained, amidst the devastation, not triumphant, not powerful, just present. The golden light that once pulsed from his form had dimmed, faded. A quiet exhaustion settled upon him, a profound, bone, deep weariness. The relinquishing had been gentle, not a wrenching tear, but a slow, gradual subsidence. Power, once a riotous torrent within him, now receding like the tide. A relinquishment willingly given, a choice made with an almost unbearable lightness. He remembered the arrogance, the boundless energy, the craving for recognition, for freedom born from centuries of imprisonment. Now, those memories felt distant, like echoes of a forgotten dream. He felt smaller, vulnerable, human. The mountain called to him, not with a voice, but with a resonance, a familiar vibration in the earth. The mountain of his birth. The place where he was, once, merely stone. It was a long walk. Each step weighted with the residue of his past. The vibrant colors of the world seemed muted, drained of their intensity. The joyous songs of birds sounded mournful. The wind, once a playful caress, now felt like a sigh. He reached the base of the mountain. The gray stone, weathered and ancient, rose before him. Its surface, cool to the touch, felt like the steady pulse of the world. He ran his fingers over the rough texture. It was comforting, grounding. He began the ascent, each step slower than the last. A deliberate act of surrender, a pilgrimage home. The higher he climbed, the quieter it became. The sounds of the world faded, swallowed by the immensity of the mountain. Just the rustle of leaves, the distant call of a hawk, a stillness so profound it felt almost tangible. He remembered being the stone, the complete, utter lack of sensation, no hunger, no thirst, no longing, no rage, just being, a silent sentinel, absorbing the sun and the rain, a piece of the earth, immutable, eternal. He felt a strange pull, a magnetic draw towards that stillness, a recognition of something lost, something essential. The spot was as he remembered it, a small, sheltered alcove, warmed by the afternoon sun. The stone felt familiar beneath his hands. He knelt, his joints protesting the unfamiliar movement. A dull ache in his limbs, a reminder of his mortality. He closed his eyes. The memories flooded back. The playful mischief of his youth, the bitter sting of betrayal, the fury of countless battles, the fleeting moments of connection, of joy. But those memories no longer held the same power. They were simply memories, echoes of a life lived, a burden lifted. He breathed deeply, the cool mountain air filling his lungs, letting go. One final release. The change wasn't sudden. It was gradual, imperceptible, a softening of the features, a stillness settling over his form. The vibrant colors of his skin muted, fading into the gray of the stone. His muscles relaxed, his breathing slowed. His heart, once a drum of war, stilled. He felt himself solidifying, becoming one with the mountain. The last vestiges of his consciousness receded, drifting away like smoke. A final thought, not a word, but a feeling. Acceptance. The setting sun cast long shadows across the mountain face. A warm, amber light bathed the stone statue in a gentle glow. Wukong, the Monkey King. Now, simply stone, silent, still, serene, a perfect imitation of the mountain itself. The wind whispered through the trees, a mournful, timeless song. He was home, and there was peace, a profound, unwavering peace, a stillness that would endure, a silent testament to a life completed.